So welcome to the podcast, our Black Lives Matter edition, because Black Lives Matter and Black trans lives matter.
Yes.
It's a good thing to say.
Yeah, it's a good thing to get straight out the gate.
Yeah, because it's kind of like a repel undead spell in Skyrim. Like, you just say Black Lives Matter, and just like all the racists, they just scatter away. They just
go away.
like,
there we go. It's fine. Now we can talk.
If you're a racist, you can go ahead and like unfollow and leave now, because we don't want you listening to our podcast
or drinking our tea.
No, exactly. It's like a spell. It's like chases the dementors away. Oh, we don't want to go there though.
No,
we need to find another reference for that.
Yeah, we're not talking about a neoliberal Voldemort anymore.
Yeah. So how are you? How are you holding up in this new world that we're trying to create?
Oh man, so I'm a white woman. And
really?
Yeah, I know, it's really difficult to believe. Yes, I come from a little village that is not particularly diverse. I only started learning about diversity and the struggles of people of colour in a more their sense when I moved to a city to go to university. And this last week or so has been a real eye-opener. I've realised how uneducated I am, how detached I am. Like, I tout myself as being fairly progressive, but man, racial politics and looking into and educating myself, because that's all I can do, because I am not a voice. Like, the most I can do is amplify other people's voices. Researching it,
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of people aren't aware of just how systemic it is.
Yeah.
Because just because certain rights were given doesn't mean that they're distributed equally. Like, you have the right to vote, but voter suppression exists to prevent people from voting. And that's not even going into the concept of privilege, where like these implicit biases affect you whether you're walking to a store, get pulled over by the cops.
Stop and search is practically not going to happen to me at all.
And so what I think about is more interesting about this current movement is it's more for abolition of the systems themselves rather than reform. And that's something I wasn't even aware of previously. I mean, I follow progressive politics pretty closely, I think, and racial politics because I'm a person of color, but this was not something I knew of. And as Asians, we have our own sort of like weird privilege in that there's this model minority myth where people use us as an example of what other races should be, but it's really because they want to point to us as being docile or compliant. They're saying, well, other races should be compliant, and that is kind of like a white supremacy thing. But yeah, I probably do need to be more in tune with certain ideas in politics, like defunding the police, which is to say not that the police are going to be gone tomorrow, but that we should look into other ways of distributing that money and sort of specializing what we imagine the police to be so that we have people who are qualified to do certain jobs rather than send a guy with a gun to everything. And one thing I didn't realize when looking at the numbers is just how much money and just how much responsibility we put into quote-unquote public safety. We roughly, and this is like every city in America, we spend about roughly 50% of our funding goes to police. Like, New York spends $6 billion on their police force, which is more than the GDP of like 50 countries. It's insane how much money we put into this one department. And yeah, until recently, with these protests, like, it's kind of gone under the radar. Like, but now we've kind of seen it in practice, where these police come out with the tanks and this riot gear and tear gas, and they're just armed like a fucking military organization. And overfunding the whole military industrial complex and overfunding these forever wars in the Middle East has been a thing that we've, like, liberals have protested against for a while, and conservatives have always tried to like deflect by saying, oh, you don't support the troops or whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's like people have realized to the extent that militarization has also like trickled down to the police.
Yeah.
But then you see it on the streets, and the first question is like, where does all this
Where's
money
the free
come from?
healthcare?
Yeah, exactly. Where are the masks during this fucking COVID crisis? Like, why are teachers paying for their own supplies? Like, and the military gets tanks. Like, the teachers should get tanks
To teach the kids
yeah.
about systematic oppression.
I would love to see like a third grade teacher roll into fucking elementary school with a tank. That was why not? That'll teach little Brandon to throw a fucking fit in class.
I mean, I think they need to buy the paper and pens first, but
it'd be just as useful as a tank for the fucking police, I'd say that. So yeah, and there's I've also listened to podcasts where they've talked about how trying to reform the police doesn't work because you're basically putting more money into the police to fund programs like sensitivity training, which doesn't work, which just makes them more sort of resentful. So it's just, yeah, it's a clusterfuck. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes forward. Like Minneapolis has vowed to defund the police and reimagine it and divert, funds to other programs or workers who are more qualified to do the jobs as opposed to a guy with a gun.
The thing that I've learned, because a lot of the online content that I observe and digest is American based. So the drag queens that I follow are mainly American based, and the music, the podcasts, everything that I follow is US based. So I've got a load of resources to learn about race relations within the US. It's been tracking it down to a specialised UK perspective and just learning things which you think should cause an uproar. Like, I learnt a couple of days ago that up until 2015, UK taxpayer money was being used to pay off a debt caused by the ending of the slave trade. They paid the slave owners for losing their property. A sum of around £16 billion in 2013 money. And taxpayers in the UK have been paying off that debt up until 2015.
You guys have reparations, but they're not for the people who are enslaved. They're
No.
for the slave owners. What?
Yep.
That is crazy. I thought it was crazy that you guys are still paying your queen.
Yeah.
Like $90 million or whatever it is to be the queen. Yeah, that is insane. Yeah. And all these things are sort of built in the system because the people who make the laws are generally the slave owners, the former slave owners who benefit from these laws.
Yeah, there's been some fantastic infographics going around about how many prominent UK politicians have familial connections and have benefited and do owe their place in society to the slave trade.
Yeah. And even today, we have like modern forms of slavery where you incarcerate people and then you have them work for free, more or less, right? So you basically create a bunch of bullshit crimes, like small crimes, like, marijuana possession or whatever. Like even George Floyd was like, what was it, like a $20 counterfeit bill? Like he was accused
which wasn't
of, like,
even counterfeit.
Yeah. So you have all these bullshit crimes, then you put them in the prison, then you get them to work for free, and there you have your slave labor. It's just like the system itself is broken. So, but yeah, it's a lot to digest. So it's important that we all educate ourselves on the various ways the system kind of oppresses people. And generally, don't be afraid of getting put on a list by some crazy racist.
Oh, yep, the Traitor List. One angry gamer has put together a traitor list of every single company and public figure who has come out in support of Black Lives Matter. PG Tips isn't on there yet, nor is Yorkshire Tea. But that only happened yesterday. Maybe he's only doing American-based companies.
Yeah, it's just hilarious to me that there's these racists that are trying to boycott every single thing, and a lot of these companies aren't even real allies. It's just performance art, but the fact that they have to boycott them anyway.
And like you said, it's mostly performative. Like, they need to start doing actual systematic change within their own companies, diversifying boardrooms and things like that. They need to start doing that. Because otherwise it's just words. But even just the thought of putting out those words is apparently such a controversial statement to somebody that, racism bad, people matter, Black Lives Matter. Apparently that's such a controversial statement that people are still willing to, boycott a company. And it's performance art. It's high performance art. And it's ridiculous.
And the thing is, diversity helps your company. It brings in different experiences, different perspectives, and real actionable things that are more important than sort of a line on a resume, which is what hirers often use to grade whether they want to recruit somebody or not. And even something like The Witcher, which is based on Poland and is set in a sort of like a European fantasy world, they have racism in the world itself. They have racism toward elves. And hiring a black writer, for instance, hiring someone who has experience with racism firsthand could help with that. It's helpful to just have people who had different experiences that can relate to the source material. The same logic applies to the art room when we're talking about a common complaint is black hair is not sort of rendered correctly in video games. Well, part of the problem is there's not enough black artists on the payroll or people who can help with that, black people on staff who can sort of assist the artist, and it makes the end product weaker. And a common complaint I hear is that, oh, you need to judge people just on their merits, don't factor in race. But there's multiple problems with that, not just in the way we define merit, which is often full of bias and racism, but also in the fact that not bringing in a diversity of perspectives just limits the total amount of knowledge that can be gained. If you hire people with the same backgrounds, you're kind of hiring a redundant skill set, life experience-wise.
Different perspectives offer something to your company. They offer something to your product. They offer something to your market. Everybody's happy. It's not just filling quotas. It has an actual purpose.
Yeah, and I feel like in video games, a lot of the content is redundant because there's just a lack of imagination or a lack of perspective from other cultures. It's the same old shit. Even in the modding world, we see that a lot. Like I asked you to research this for me. How many followers in Skyrim, how many modded followers are people of color?
So I am looking at standardized, standalone followers. Now,
because we know that Interesting NPCs has, because I have pretty much 2 of everything. It's like Noah's Ark. So we're talking about just standalone followers that aren't part of quests.
So in terms of standalone followers, the majority are white. There are some East Asian coded followers.
Yeah,
and
that's not surprising. Waifus, no East Asian male characters.
You can say no East Asian male characters. You can say that, I can't. We get to page 9, and nope, still nothing.
So you're on page 9 of Nexus. See, here's the thing: there are no Asians canon in Tamriel, are there? Asians aren't a thing.
Not as far as I'm aware. There's certain coding in the portrayal of, I think it's the Dark Elves are the closest to...
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know Akaviri uses Japanese
architecture. Oh yeah, Akaviri, of course. But there's no actual Akaviri that you can encounter in the game either.
No, but they're not Asian either, right?
No.
They're white from what I understand. So it's like cultural appropriation there. So that's a little bit sketchy on its own. But here's the thing. You're on page 9 of followers on Nexus, and you've encountered more Asian people, which don't exist in Tamriel, than you have Redguard followers, right?
Asian coded, not...
Yeah, still.
Because technically Asian isn't a thing in...
Yeah, exactly.
Like you said.
But you could still,
I found an orc on...
An orc is
page
good. An
13.
Orc is diverse.
Oh, here we go. Found one. So...
Nice.
We are on the bottom of page 13, and we have Yashira, custom-voiced Redguard follower. So I'll send you the link.
So everybody try that out.
Maybe. It might be good, it might not be. She is hypersexualized, so there we go.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, exactly. There's always something, so don't download that one. But no, one that isn't hypersexualized that you found is from a friend of the show, Anna Castiglione, for Anna NPCs, right?
Yes, but it does go against our criteria of standalone follower mods.
But then it's not like a quest mod that includes a follower. It's a mod that just has a bunch of followers, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it qualifies. So there you go. Yay for Anna. But yeah, there's just a lack of representation, I think, in video games for people of color. And the thing about that is that it kind of feeds into the media stereotypes. If you don't see people of color in positions where they're heroes or where they're the good guys, it kind of feeds into that perspective or that stereotype. The more representation, the more people get a clearer picture. It humanizes.
Yeah.
people. And so that's why it's
representation is incredibly important.
Yeah, and that's why it's so disappointing that as modders we haven't done better. We need to do better. Again, you should be incentivized to do better. Just because if there's like 500 different waifu followers, you should be incentivized to not make a waifu. You shouldn't be saying, I'm going to make the 501st waifu and that one's going to be the best waifu there is. You shouldn't be saying that. You should be saying, okay, there's a market inefficiency for followers of color, and there's, I should attack that. I should, make something that is unique. Or if you're just a waifu man, make a red guard waifu. I mean, it's not that hard. Like, the inability to see black women as soft and tender is another sort of racist thing that's out there. It will be interesting, being that Elder Scrolls 6 is set in Hammerfell, if the ratio continues to be this bad. Hopefully it won't, but only time will tell. I mean, but this has been an issue for a long time in terms of just the content on the Nexus, the sheer amount of waifus on there.
Yeah, there's a definite issue within the gaming community as a whole with racism. Massive lack of diversity, and especially with online play, cesspool that it is, the insults that are slung amongst players so casually. I was reading this article that came out literally just a couple of hours ago on Comics Beat, which, no idea as to their background and stuff like that, but it was reporting and linking to various articles, including one on The Verge. Playing Red Dead Online as a black character means enduring racist garbage, where people will roleplay as slave owners and members of the KKK.
Yeah, and that's a perfect example of privilege, right? You can't play... I mean, if you want to experience what the difference is, like, in terms of, like, being a white person in America, being a black person in America, try being black on Red Dead Online. I mean, maybe that will help you understand it a little bit more. I don't know.
It's just so casual in general, the way that people online can just sling out racist slurs.
Yeah, it's been normalized
and
in that
there's
sphere.
No consequence.
Like 4chan, all those like sites where they just basically just normalize saying racist shit, and they feel like it's their safe space, more or less, to be racist, right? And this place is no longer it's not your safe space. It's we're gonna say Black Lives Matter, and it's just gonna be like goodbye. But we can't say it's like a Harry Potter spell, because we're just not talking about that person anymore. I don't know if you want to explain it.
So, J.K. Rowling. Once upon a time, she was the darling of literacy. And she decided that in the middle of a new civil rights movement, it would be good to start being transphobic again.
I mean, she struggled with a lot of progressive issues. Like, not just in her writings.
Why do you think I call her neoliberal Voldemort?
I mean, her books have always been a little bit weird, and it's like a lot of the time she's tried to like shoehorn in like gay or lesbian characters, or like, Asian characters after the fact. And
then refuse to represent them when they're put into a prequel, which would have been the time frame in which the gay or LGBT aspects of their characters would once have been, evident.
It's a little bit problematic for sure, and a lot of it, I was willing to kind of excuse, because as a product of the 90s, maybe she just wasn't aware, maybe some of this information, because a lot of us are still learning, even now, about these issues. We're still educating ourselves. So I kind of gave her a pass in that, like, okay, she grew up in a culture that's predominantly white. She probably didn't know about a lot of these issues when she wrote the books. So maybe now that she is older, wiser, she has been on Twitter, she has like learned things, that she'd be better for it. But no, she's a TERF. It's 2020 and she's a TERF. It's inexcusable.
And the actors from Harry Potter are coming out against her.
Yeah. Because like Daniel Radcliffe. What a radcliffe that man is.
He said that denying trans women is denying their existence.
Yeah, and well, he mentioned the science behind it. That's the important thing. It's like neither him nor J.K. Rowling has the authority to really speak on this issue, because they're not scientists, right? And the science backs that trans women are women.
They're not people who suffer from gender dysphoria. They're not people who are transitioning.
Yeah. And the science says trans women are women, trans men are men. And so he not only came out in, on the right side, I think, he also like backed it up with knowledge. And so that's, I think, is a good thing. Like, neither you nor I have the authority to talk on this. Let's listen to the authority, and they say this is right. And so that I think that was a good way of putting it. And like, again, it's 2020. Like, I'm generally more forgiving in that I feel like people can learn, people can be better, just because from my own experience, I was probably a terrible, like much worse in terms of progressive issues in the 90s or whatever. I was probably like a horrible person. Like, 20-year-old me I do not want to see his opinions online. Thank God I did not have social media in the 90s or the early 2000s, because I was fucking terrible. But I think, like, as you learn and educate yourself, like,
you have to be willing to learn, though. That's the thing.
Yeah. And I think, like, where interesting NPCs went from, like, where it started to toward the end, I think, like, just adding Tareen and a transgender character, like, helped me, because I had to research what it was about, and I had to research and learn and educate myself. And I think doing stuff like that, I think that's why not having those characters in Harry Potter kind of like reflects the person who she is, because she didn't have to put herself in those shoes, what I mean, in a real deep and understanding and empathetic way. Like, if you just have these facile characters, you just like, oh, that person's Asian, oh, that person's gay. Like, you don't really have to.
You're not writing about their experience. You're making it their defining character trait.
Yeah. It's something you just slap on.
It's not something that affects them as a character. If you don't research it, if you don't look into how it would affect them.
Yeah, it's not earned. It's not coming from an honest
place. It informs their character.
Yeah.
It isn't the center of their character, but it informs the character. It informs your portrayal. And if you're looking around and if you genuinely want to include people of colour, black people, trans characters, lesbian, gay, everything, if you want to include it, and if you want to include it well, to the point where it can be seen as good representation, you need to research. You need to see what's happened in the period that you're writing about. You need to see what's led up to it. You need to understand the whole experience before you can write it. And even then, don't write it as the centre of the character, because there is nothing worse than a character where their one defining trait is, I'm black, or I'm gay.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that is one note, that's not representation.
Exactly. That's what gives rise to people saying, oh, they're a token character or whatever, because they're not three-dimensional, they're one-dimensional. And it's important to approach every character like they're a real person. I mean,
character.
Yeah, they're a human being. They're not just this, that it doesn't define them. And so
it doesn't define them, but it informs them.
Exactly. In general, in life, it's important to not define yourself by one thing. Like, you don't define yourself by your looks or your acting career or whatever. They're just parts of you.
Yeah.
It doesn't define your self-worth.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not like Nexus endorsements, which I use to define my self-worth. That's the only thing you can use to define your self-worth is Nexus endorsements, because I have a lot of them. That's how I know I'm a good person.
So there we go. I'm officially worthless, thanks, mate.
No. You're worth just by virtue of being around me and my Nexus endorsements. You just kind of gain some by osmosis.
Basking in it.
Yeah, my endorsements are your endorsements because you contributed to. Because it takes a village. It takes a village. It's not one person making a mod. We all made that mod. We all get to define ourselves by the number of endorsements it has.
Striking words there from Chris Takahashi.
Okay. Well, yeah, I think that about covers it. I really wanted to talk about this issue sort of, and how systemic racism kind of applies to like the modding world, the gaming world, just because it seems like more of our speed, more of our niche, and hopefully
I wanted to say I'm trying to learn. That's what I'm saying. And in regards to that, there is one UK-based organisation that I would like to promote, because I'm 25 years old. It should not have taken such a massive movement to educate me and to encourage me to educate myself on black issues and issues of people of colour, especially within the UK. So one project and one campaign that I'd like to promote is the Black Curriculum. It's working on bringing black culture, black history into schools to make sure that you don't end up as ignorant as me. So that's theblackcurriculum.com. It's for primary through to college age, and yeah, it introduces you to it. It's aiming to bring a less whitewashed version of history into UK schools.
A last thing I'll say is a small suggestion to Nexus is to possibly, because we can donate our money, our donation points that we earn, and donation points are great, but I would like to be able to donate to more social justice causes, and such as Black Lives Matter, ACLU, abolish ICE kind of stuff would also be good. But just to have a wider breadth of places we can donate, because right now what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to take it out, cash it out as money, and then
donate it.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm probably going to do that for the rest of the year, is donate all my DP to Black Lives Matters and like bail bond type charities, because like people who are protesting are going to be incarcerated, and you need to help, like, and part of the system that we were talking about, systemic racism, is like bail bonds are super expensive or whatever, and they charge a bunch of interest. So just donating to those causes is good. I also think something that would be really cool is having contests and things on major sites like the Nexus where you encourage creation of LGBT or people of color, POC, follower mods, and things that are lacking on the Nexus. You can have these contests and reward the top prize monetarily. I would be actually willing to help fund that. So let's go ahead and do that, Nexus. We could have a contest, and the winner and second and third place get a prize, and what ends up happening is you have like hundreds of entries, and it fills that gap, it fills that need. So that would be something that'd be really cool, that I think would help the cause and would also provide excellent content, and Nexus would benefit because they would get a ton of new content to put ads on. So there you go, everybody wins.
Yeah.
Anyways, any last thoughts?
Yeah, so this was heavier than our usual episode, and deservedly so.
And remember, this is a marathon, not a sprint. So everybody keep
Don't give up just because it's a week and there's a new hashtag trend or something like that. Not that any of our followers do that. It's more than a trend. It's a social movement. It's fighting for justice. And you can't get equality after years and years and years and years of oppression, systematic racism. You can't get there in a week of protest. It's something that's going to have to go on and on and on, and do not let loose steam, because the people in power, they've got hella endurance. So that's the same thing that we need as well.
They have like entropy and doing nothing on their side, because if they do nothing, the system stays and they win, more or less, right? Like, so it's going to take more than voting. It's going to take like an overhaul of the system. Voting for people who are willing to overhaul the system. Not, I mean, it sucks to say, but our presidential candidate that's going against Trump is like Mr. Shoot You in the Leg guy. He's like, don't shoot him in the heart, shoot him in the leg. Like, that's not a solution. How about the police just don't shoot us, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, unfortunately, he's the candidate this time around. But you want to vote in people who are for the things that you want to change.
Your governors, your councillors, even at the smallest governmental level. From what I understand of the US political system, it's more of a state thing rather than a. If you want to affect change, you need to start working at the lower levels up.
Yeah.
And keep fighting.
Find the candidate who wants to give teachers tanks and vote for that person.
Vote for the tanks.
All right, that's it for this episode.
Thank you for bearing with us.
I don't know. No, again, it's perfect. It's like a cleansing. We'll get rid of all the racists.
But yeah, there we go. That was the serious episode. Ta-da!